Namo Amida Butsu. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are, in whichever realms of existence you are, whatever mind state you're in, whatever conditions you're in. As always, you're welcome to my channel. Right, I'm doing another impromptu, quick, well, maybe not so quick, video. But I don't have a lot of time because I'm busy at the moment. So I'm making this while doing various jobs. So, right, I wanted to make a quick video. I talked about in a previous video of mine about how it's only through Amida's light, lots of different things have been sort of uncovered, revealed, discovered for me. Through Amida's working, through Amida's light, through that whole process, that inconceivable process, and some of those or made me or somehow gave me access to it through various sort of mundane means, whether that be internet, YouTube, what have you, or other media, or texts, or literature, or whatever. But anyway, various means. Anyway, so making me steering me toward those things, or what's the word I'm looking for? Somehow making me aware of the choice to look at these things in life, making me aware of the opportunity, whether that's unconscious or unconsciously, however that process works, but kind of availing me of the opportunity. I still have to choose to take it, kind of thing, to look, to reflect, to think. And anyway, I talked about some dark truths, and I'm going to talk about one of those dark truths. One of those dark truths is that the way samsaric existence operates, well, that could be a whole series, but when you break it down to the samsaric existence, just in practical terms. So thinking of things like your social political values, let's say, what you think is like your political, social, philosophical values when it comes to politics. That's what I mean. Not philosophical when it comes to kind of spiritual matters. Obviously, you're a Buddhist, so chances are you're a Buddhist or a Buddhist inquirer at a minimum if you come to my channel. Anyway, but if you're looking at things like your Buddhist, your one's political philosophy, outside of just really basic things that the basic teachings of Buddhism, that you can glean. There's certainly social teachings, social values, in the Buddha's teaching, in the teachings of our Dharma masters, that can be gleaned and can be found there. Other than that, as a guideline, and other than the things that Shinran and Renyo have pointed us toward as guidelines of the five Confucian, for an easy shorthand to say, the five Confucian principles, although that's not really what they pointed it toward. It was more the kind of basic cultural values in them, the basic cultural, behavioral values in them, not what those 5 Confucian principles were trying to cultivate in that individual, on that spiritual level of Confucianism. Although it's not such a bad thing, it's not, I think, and I think Confucianism is Buddhism in disguise. Is one of many ways that the Buddhism bodhisattvas, have appeared and used other philosophies and religions as a skill and means. And I think Confucianism is definitely one of those. But anyway, other than that, other than what you can glean of social teachings from the Buddhist, the Buddhist teaching and that of our Dharma masters, and what Renyo and Shinran say themselves, teach themselves, and point us toward. Outside of that, nothing is real. Okay, any political parties that you think you're a member of, or you think you support, or some political philosophy outside of what I've just meant, outside of these basic things I've just mentioned, it's Kabuki theater. It's utter. That is not how the world operates. On these so-called, especially on democratic values. That's not how the world operates. The world operates on manipulation, conniving, a whole hierarchy of, right up to the clubs I've talked about, the highest clubs, that include people we don't even know about, or maybe even beings we don't even know about. Although we can kind of figure them out from Buddhist cosmology teachings. Anyway, it operates, there's nothing democratic. The whole democratic thing that's it's not real. It's Kabuki theater. Everything operates on intimidation, manipulation, in a kind of hierarchy, and all governments, all so-called elites operate using these things. It's like a mafia. It's like the John Wick movie that's a really good metaphor for the ruling classes of our world. There's the high table, and they have certain rules and boundaries for their operatives and the criminal underworld, and because if they didn't have some kind of rules and consequences, it would just be complete mayhem, and the high table wouldn't be able to control it all, etc. That I'm sure those movies were written symbolically to represent how the world is actually run. And it's basically criminality. It's basically corruption, criminality, control, intimidation of various forms, and that comes out in various ways now. And it comes out in instead of, it still comes out in threat of physical violence in various ways, but it also comes out in other means of intimidation that we've seen especially in the last several years, although it's been going on forever. Since democracies have existed, all these ways have just used and the only reason democracy exists is because it was convenient for those who were climbing to certain, positions of power in the hierarchy of the clubs that are ruled by the high table, But that's what's real in samsara. If you have any political philosophy other than the basics that I talked about from Buddhism, from Shinran and Renyo, from our Dharma masters, other than that, it's all a fantasy. Everything else, all the political things of left and right and green and libertarian and all this other stuff, it's just fodder. It's just toys for people to play with to distract them. It's not real. It has nothing to do with how it all actually operates. That's what's real. That's the reality that you live in. That's the reality of samsaric existence that we live in. in this world, not, happy politics land. It's just not that politics is happy, not that politics is happy necessarily, but um, that's the reality. Not the political paradigms, the conventional politics, all that stuff for however long it's gone on in so-called democracies. Or representative republics, or however you want to pretend that you're ruled. It's not. That's all fantasy too. All that stuff. The way that it appears, the governments appear in their structure or their constitution, whether it's an informal one or a written one like the United States, or an informal one in the UK, or or wherever it is in the world, all these so-called constitutions and the structure, the way things are, that is all just part of the Kabuki theater. Has nothing to do with the way the world actually operates. That's just samsaric. That's samsaric reality. I'm sorry. That's the way it is. And, that's one of the things you have to come to grips with as a Buddhist. For me, that's one of the things I had to come to grips with. Like, okay, this is really, and I started seeing it like about 40 years ago, actually, maybe even more than that, actually, but definitely like 40 years ago. I started to really see this, at least just began to, and it just gradually grew over time, and with punctuated equilibrium, if you like, if I want to borrow a term from evolution science, that gradually my mind gradually changed. Not that it's a different thing. It's a metaphor. I'm using that terminology. My thinking evolved and grew, and awareness grew. Again, this is because of the light of Amida. All my life, before I was even knew about Pure Land or Jodo Shinshu, and then after even just after I knew Buddhism, but wasn't really exploring Pure Land or Jodo Shinshu, it was still, the light was there and was still illuminating the things for me. And this is one of the things that started getting illumined for me back then. And what I was trying to say was, it would grow along slowly. My awareness would grow slowly, and then all of a sudden events in the world or something would happen, and I'd suddenly have a burst of realizing, okay, a whole nother level. And that's happened several times over the decades of my life. More recently, from I would say there was, in the late 80s, it happened at some point in the 90s, but then big time, obviously, after the events of 9/11 and the way the world changed after that. That was a big eye-opener when I started looking into all the way things were changing and things. That I kind of knew what was coming because I had previously already been aware for 20 years of this stuff to that time. So, I kind of knew what they were going to be up to and changing in the world, the clubs, the clubs, the hierarchy, how they were going to how they were utilizing the events of that time, and places and things. And then again, it happened in about 2011, 2012. I had another one of those kind of punctuated equilibriums in my awareness of it. And then starting from about it didn't really stop much from 2012, but it kind of had stops and starts. But it was much more accelerated than ever since that point. And then around 2015, 2016, those events, it really took off. And so the last several years, more and more of it's just been illumined by Amida for me. And it changes, and then there was life events too that have really changed my outlook on things, samsaric events in my own personal life, in my family's lives, and that changes you, and you have the Buddhist teachings to guide that, but So what I was trying to say is that it changes you. Seeing these stuff really changes your outlook, it changes your whole thing to where all I can do is try as best I can. It's coming back to what I was saying in the beginning about the basic social ethics and teachings in the that point toward the way you should behave in society and your country of origin or with others or how or the poor or what have you, any and all those things, um the way that you should conduct yourself. And that's what I try to do. I try to use those things as guidelines. I know I'm going to fail because I'm a Bombu. I'm not going to do very well with any of that. Sorry, bear with me a sec. I just want to check on something. No, okay. So yeah, I'm not going to do very well with any of that stuff, but because I'm a Bombu, I'm an ordinary being, so I'm not going to really be very effective in all that kind of stuff. But I try to use the guidelines of Shakyamuni, the not guidelines, but the teachings that Shakyamuni gave about these things, and Renyo, and the guidelines that Renyo and Shinran set up, and our Dharma masters. I try to use that as best I can, but beyond that, it's politics to me is a complete sham. It's an utter sham. It's just Kabuki theater. And so there might and so you have to kind of pragmatically, you still need to participate in those things if you're in a society, if you're in a democratic, society, then you still need to participate in politics and, and these social things to, and voting, and you can't avoid it. If you do avoid it, it's kind of not really, you're not really living by the principles of Buddhism. So you're not really not living by the guidelines for example, Renyo said about how you should conduct yourself in society, or Shinran or Honen. So you need to do that. You still need to participate. It's something along the lines that I think Renyo said, you should, in your heart, follow the Dharma, but in all other things, you follow the laws and rules and civic responsibilities of your locality, of your nation, of what have you. And being in a democratic society, that means, you need to participate in that stuff. So I try as best I can to see where these Buddhist guidelines and principles pragmatically kind of fit with the conventional politics, and and that's how I guide my voting, guide what I align with, guide what I but oftentimes that winds me up in the middle. It brings me toward the middle way, the very thing with it. And some things I lean left, some things I lean right. So oftentimes when I'm trying to live by those principles, I don't really fit into an easy category of the conventional left-right paradigm or the political spectrum, or however you want to look at it. I just don't. There's some things in certain political philosophies and ideologies that I lean toward for some things, and I lean toward others for others. So it's difficult. It's definitely difficult, and it's especially difficult when so much of it's just, like I said, Kabuki theater. It's just a sham that that it's just toys to play with to make you feel like you're actually accomplishing something. And to some degree, there is some social pressure from the public, in these things. I'm not saying there's nothing there, but a lot of times the public, the so-called masses get just, manipulated by all of that stuff that I was talking about, the hierarchy, the corruption, the criminal. It's basically like a mafia. It's just, that's how the world is run. It's run like a mafia. It is. That's just a fact. If you look into, I'm sorry if that bothers your normalcy bias. I'm sorry if that shatters some illusion that you have about some kind of, ideals that you have, but that is the way it is. If you start to really look deeply into things like we're supposed to as Buddhists, if you look deeply into it and you're illumined by Amida's light, you're going to see it. So, yeah, it makes it tricky. It makes it tricky to try to be the best Buddhist in that context. And a lot of times it comes down to me, I look for what would create the least harm. What's the least harmful thing? And sometimes that's all you can do. They're both, all the options are going to be harmful. Quite often in samsara, all the options are harmful. All the political, social, military, whatever the options are, they're all going to be bad. They're all going to be bad. So you have to make your decision. Like, to me anyway, I make my decision based on what's the least harmful thing according to Buddhist principles that I could align with here, that I could vote for here, that I could support here. What's the most, and also, so what's the least harmful? What's the most compassionate? And what's the most wise thing? What's the most wise thing for a society to be or to do or to have? What's the most compassionate thing? And again, the options are going to always be bad in samsaric existence. I'm sorry, there just are. There are some countries where it hasn't in past years been so bad to be able to balance that. There are certain countries that used to do that very well, but now everything's, like I said, everything's changing. Like Rust Cole says, it's all one ghetto, man, from True Detective. But the whole world is altered now. The whole world is just, so there's really no countries that are really doing that like they did very well, like they once did. But they at one point, even in Mappo, they still had the collective karmic causes for their culture to be that way, to live that way. But it is a rarity. It's definitely a rarity. It's, even then it was, but now it's just gone. It's gone. It's all gone now. So it is what it is. So that's the way I try to, even though I know it's all a sham, and even though I know it's all a samsaric, nightmare of less bad choices options. Oh yeah, and I always lean toward also more peaceful solutions, less violent solutions, more diplomatic solutions than their opposite. But again, that's not always there. That's so anyway, that's how I see it, that's how I do it, and that's part of the, like I said, the dark truths. That's one of the very big dark truths that Amida's light has illumined for me. And I think it makes it easier to see that, and to, it's hard at first to come to terms with it, and then but as it's gone on, I prefer to know that's the way things operate. I just prefer to know that, and then go from there as a Buddhist. Then in the past, being, trying to try to have certain values, but it not quite adding up, and doesn't really fit, and, not knowing why, and not getting why. Well, now I know why, because now I know. It just is what it is. So, right. So thanks for listening to another episode of Every Bombu's Got One. This is definitely one of those categories. It's definitely a video for that series. So thank you for listening, and I'll take this video out with some Nambutsu. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Buts, Namanda Buts, Namanda Buts, Namanda. Till next time.